The grand dining hall of the five-star restaurant gleamed beneath glittering crystal chandeliers, the air alive with laughter, polished silverware clinking, and the gentle strains of a piano drifting from the corner. Well-dressed men in tailored suits and women in gowns that shimmered with each movement carried themselves with practiced grace, their every gesture reflecting status and sophistication. Yet, away from the center of the room, a single figure sat at a corner table, her quiet presence commanding notice even without words. She wore a modest dark kimono-style dress, a choice that spoke more dignity and restraint than a fleeting fashion. Her silver hair, neatly pinned back, framed a face etched not only with age but with decades of wisdom and lived experience. Her hands, faintly unsteady, rested against the linen as she clutched a small pendant close to her chest. Everyone knew who she was, a wealthy tycoon. The moment she entered, whispers had swept across the room. That's a Japanese entrepreneur who built a fortune in Tokyo, some murmured. She must be in New York for business. Others speculated. But despite the admiration her name carried, tonight felt different. She was without her usual entourage, no assistants, no translators. She had come alone. When the waiter handed her a menu, her eyes moved across the English words, her expression tightening with confusion. She opened her mouth to speak, but the sentences faltered, slipping into fragments of heavily accented English that no one seemed able to decipher. The atmosphere shifted. Guests exchanged amused glances. A few hid their smiles behind glasses of wine. Even the staff, caught off guard, struggled as they leaned in, repeated themselves louder, and looked helplessly at one another. What had begun as admiration had quickly become uncomfortable to watch. Here was a woman of immense wealth and influence, reduced in an instant to a vulnerable stranger in a place where her voice could not bridge the divide. Beneath her calm expression, her eyes betrayed a flicker of loneliness, one that no empire or fortune could shield her from. As the evening dragged on, tension thickened around her table. Servers tried pointing at menu items, raising their voices as though volume could erase misunderstanding. But it only left her more unsettled. She shook her head gently, her trembling hands clutching the pendant even tighter, silently wishing for someone who could understand. Across the room, unnoticed by most, a young waitress lingered near the background. She wasn't one of the senior staff trusted with high-profile guests. She was new, assigned to clearing glasses, refilling water, and tending the tables that rarely mattered. Her uniform was plain, her ponytail a little untidy from rushing through the night, and the only thing that set her apart was a small tag pinned to her chest. Emily. For most of the evening, Emily had done her best to remain invisible, wary of drawing the sharp eye of her strict managers. But as she watched the woman struggle in silence, something stirred deep within her, a memory. Her grandmother, an elderly woman who never mastered English even after decades in America, who sat at the kitchen table speaking Japanese while young Emily tried her best to understand. She remembered countless evenings translating for her grandmother when others grew impatient, the hidden bond they shared through a language her classmates never understood. Emily had always thought of that part of her heritage as quiet and unseen, a skill tucked away with little use. Yet now, in this glittering room where no one seemed able to help, she realized she might be the only person who could reach the woman at the corner table. Her eyes flicked toward her manager, who was already whispering instructions to another waiter, frustration playing on his face. Emily hesitated. This wasn't her table. Emily knew she wasn't supposed to step in, yet her heart pushed her forward. With quiet determination, she gathered her courage and crossed the polished floor toward the corner table. Heads turned as a young waitress, so obviously out of place among the seasoned staff and their immaculate service, knelt slightly beside the woman, meeting her eyes with gentle warmth. Emily spoke softly in Japanese. The change was immediate. The older woman's eyes widened in astonishment, shimmering as though she couldn't believe what she had heard. For a heartbeat, she sat motionless. But when Emily repeated the words, her lips trembled and tears gathered in her eyes. Relief washed across her face like dawn breaking through the night. For the first time that evening, she smiled. Her words flowed freely, smooth, confident, deeply expressive, and Emily answered with ease. The silence of misunderstanding dissolved, replaced by a bond that felt natural, almost inevitable. The entire dining room seemed to pause. Diners who had once sneered now leaned in, captivated. The millionaire who had sat in isolation was suddenly laughing softly, gratitude evident in her every glance. Emily listened patiently, relaying the woman's wishes to the kitchen, explaining her choices with care, and tending to her comfort with gentleness that restored her dignity. That small bridge of understanding had changed everything. All around them, the atmosphere shifted. Guests who had moments earlier whispered behind raised glasses now watched in reverence. It was a striking reminder that true compassion holds more weight than luxury or appearances. The evening revealed a truth. Not wealth, not titles, but kindness offered by an unlikely voice had brought peace to the table. The woman was accustomed to being celebrated for her empire and wealth. Praise and admiration had always been tied to her success. But tonight was different. Tonight she rediscovered a gift beyond fortune, the irreplaceable value of human connection. Before she left, she clasped Emily's hand, her grip unexpectedly firm, her tears shining as she whispered words of thanks in her native tongue. Only Emily understood, and no translation could capture the depth of her gratitude. When her chauffeur escorted her out, the restaurant buzzed with quiet conversations. Some guests were humbled, others inspired. Even Emily's strict manager, who had glared at her moment before, softened. He understood then that what she had offered carried far greater value than polished silver or flawless etiquette. But the story did not close with that dinner. Weeks later, a letter arrived for Emily at the restaurant. Inside was a handwritten note in Japanese and an invitation. The businesswoman had asked her to attend a Cultural Foundation event, not as staff, but as an honored guest. With it came a scholarship offer. She had discovered that Emily was studying languages at a community college, struggling to cover tuition, and she wanted to sponsor her education as thanks to the kindness that had once lifted her out of loneliness. Tears ran down Emily's cheeks as she read the letter. That single moment of compassion she had shown had blossomed into something life-changing. The woman had given her more than financial relief. She had given her recognition, affirmation that Emily's heart and heritage were treasures worth cherishing. Years later, Emily would travel the world as a professional interpreter, standing on international stages, bridging cultures, and building understanding between people who otherwise could not communicate. And every time she held a microphone or translated a voice, she remembered the evening where it all began. The glistening chandeliers, the hushed diners, and the woman whose tears spoke louder than words. The lesson never left her. Dignity and kindness outweigh riches, and sometimes the quietest voices leave the most lasting echo.